Welcome to Lead Like a Girl, where we are empowering everyday women through our stories. I'm your host, Jessica Smith, and I began this journey by sharing my life story. Now, I've joined forces with my longtime friends, Jamie and Coralyn, to keep this party going. We met many years ago as young sales girls in our 20s, driven and quickly rising to the top of our industry. As the years went on, life happened, and we all found ourselves in new companies and completely different industries, still striving for success in it all. Career, family, faith, fun. Now, it wasn't easy, but we never stopped moving. Get ready for our real conversations, inspiring stories, and our big life lessons as we share it all. The good, the bad, and the funny. Welcome to Lead Like a Girl. Hello, and welcome back to Lead Like a Girl. I am here with Coralyn and Jamie.
Hello.
And
hi.
How are you ladies? How was your week?
Busy.
So good.
Busy. Well, we're recording on Friday, and we usually don't. So happy Friday to you ladies. But I'm really excited to talk about today's topic, which was inspired by many of my topics, which is a couple weeks back, there was a sermon at church, and it talked about this concept of the dash. You guys might already know this, but I had never heard of this concept of the dash, never heard of the poem, but I was really inspired by it. And I thought, you know what, this is a great conversation to have. So I want to start off just by just kind of talking a little bit about the poem, which is the dash. Okay, so the poem is titled The Dash. It's written by Linda Ellis, and it reflects basically on the importance of how we live our lives between the date that we were born and the date of our death, right? So the poem highlights the simplicity of a tombstone's inscription. So you have the date that you were born on your tombstone, and then the dash, and kind of like a metaphor, right, for the time that we have on earth and the value of our lives that we fill with the dash, right? So I'm going to read a couple lines that kind of stood out. I went and I had to, of course, Google it myself and look up the poem. And one is, I read of a man who stood to speak at the funeral of a friend. He referred to the dates on her tombstone from the beginning to the end. But he noticed that the dash between the years was a little line, and he wondered what it meant for him and her. So again, the dash symbolizing a person's life, the years they lived, the choices they made, the relationships they formed, the legacy that they leave behind. So it's just a reminder that our lives are not really defined by the beginning and the dates alone, but more by the experiences and the relationships and the impact in between, right? So, you know, I love this because whenever I talk to people about setting goals, and I always talk about start with the end in mind. And for me, when I'm saying start with the end in mind, I'm like talking about like the end,
the absolute end.
Like, like we're
Can
done.
I just say before we hop into this, up until about 3 seconds ago, we've been talking about the dash. And in my head, I was thinking of a race from the beginning of your life to the end. And this whole time I was thinking that the dash meant a run until you read that line of that poem, that it's literally the dash of a date.
Your whole
Correct?
life.
Yes.
The dash is your whole life.
It's literally the little line, the hyphen, dash equals hyphen, right?
Yes. And the little light just went off.
Right? Just like, whoop.
I heard it. I heard the light bulb.
Now that we've cleared that up.
Okay. All right. We can continue. I just needed to say for the record, just in case there's other bright people out there like myself that is confusing other forms of dashing.
Oh, boy. And someone had you confused with Jamie as, I thought she was the blonde.
You know what? I will say for the record, though, I think this is okay. I'm just going to interject this. The reason that I feel like the dash is a run is really oddly, I have had this reoccurring dream since I was a little girl, and literally dashing, like running through a field with tons of people on my left, tons of people on my right. And I look over and the person on my left isn't there anymore, or the person on my right is not there anymore. And looking at it and thinking, like, what does this even mean? And something that I had thought of is that I'm running a race of life, and some people make it farther than others for whatever reason. And I think that that's why that dash represented a race, because that's this weird dream that I've had for a significant portion of my life. And so
okay, well, you know what? Then I stand corrected. I think it works. I think it works.
Maybe.
I think
I
they
don't
both
know.
work.
Maybe.
I think it could be a dash and a dash.
Right? It could be. It could be.
I think there's two dashes that we need to talk about here.
Can you segue with your cooking, Jamie? Like a dash of salt? Is that a life lesson on how to life plan? Can you incorporate food into this or something?
I was like,
what do you got, Jamie?
The whole intro, I'm thinking about death. I'm just like, okay, I'm thinking about a tombstone. Yeah, what did I do in that dash?
Well, I was just gonna. That's what I was gonna ask.
Salt.
Where's your mind? That's exactly what I was going to ask, Jamie. So when you hear that, right? What I was just talking about, where was your mind going?
My mind was, to be honest, I was thinking about, and this might be completely off in another realm, but I was thinking about that. I was thinking about birth and death, who you connect with in between birth and death. Who are the people who are there for you, that you're there for, that are in your lives, that make a difference, that are part of your legacy, that part of your success, that you help. And honestly, my mind went a little bit to social media, because I was thinking, a lot of times people will, let's say they'll rate their value on how many people say happy birthday to them. They'll rate their value on, or they'll rate maybe their impact on others on how many likes they get, or how much,
my mother,
how much interaction they get on social media.
Mm-hmm.
But one of the things that I've always noticed, paid attention to, is those quiet, long-term, valuable friends and family who don't care if it's blasted across the world or if it's an individual note or phone call to you directly. And I feel like when we talk about the dash, I don't think that it can be measured in any way other than exactly how your heart feels, in terms of like, okay, who have I impacted and who's in my life, and how was this person important to me, and how am I important to that person? So I went to social media, to be honest, because I was like, oh man, I bet a lot of people are like, oh, I got 4,000 happy birthdays. That's cool. But did you,
awesome.
Did somebody come over and bring you a cupcake? That, no, don't get me wrong. Like everyone has their different ways of like kind of judging, or I guess measuring, what their inner circle is. But I also think that like so much of it is also your impact on people, like one-on-one, or your you and other people's impact on you one-on-one. So that's kind of where I went with it. I was like, I think that's a little bit off, maybe a topic, but that's just where I went with that, and it's timely.
No, I think it totally goes. So when you think about those dash moments, right? Because I'm saying this, when I think about what I'm calling dash moments, they are really pivotal things that happen in my life that shaped who I am.
Mm-hmm.
So when I tell my story, there's some like key highlights to my story. Highlights or lowlights? They're
life-changing events.
Yes, that really make your dash. So I'll share one, and I'm curious to know what comes to mind when I say that. The first thing that came to mind for me, it's being a teen mom, right? Like I tell my oldest son all the time, like, dude, like you saved my life, because I have literally could have been dead had I not had you. And that was one of my dash moments that really shaped who I am today. And when I think about my life and my death, that was one of them. What do you guys think is what's one of those moments for you?
I think as you were talking, I think that kind of a cool aha moment for me when I was just about to graduate from college, and I was thinking about getting an apartment, and I was talking with my dad who owned some rental property. And I think that I was looking at, just getting an apartment someplace. And he said, why don't you buy a house? Why don't you buy something? And I said, well, I'm only 21. I like that hadn't crossed my mind as being an option for somebody who was young. And he looked at me and he said, why not? And we've learned in a couple episodes prior that I had a serving job where I was making some pretty good money. And so I had this stash of dollars sitting there, just kind of burning a hole in my pocket. My literal dollars. My mom always called me her frugal daughter. Like,
another job.
I don't like to spend money. I just like put it in. I just save money. I don't like to spend it. I like to save it. And for who knows. So anyways, all that to say is that I think that my dad's saying, when I said, why not? And he's like, well, how could I do that? And he's like, why not you? Why can't you? And so when I was 22 years old, I bought my first house, and it was actually a rental property. And I feel like that specific thing, being able to invest in real estate as a young person, but also opening your mind to look at, if somebody is doing it, regardless of how old you are, why not you? Why, if it's not you, then who, right? So I think that was a big moment in my life.
Yeah. Jamie, what's your dash?
That's great.
Moment that kind of shaped who you are?
Mine might be a little bit morbid. So I was in a long-term relationship with someone who had a couple of kids, and one of his children went through cancer while we were together and passed away. And then about 6 months later, one of my best friends passed away from cancer. And I always say, like, if I didn't have my faith, I couldn't have gotten through that. But like the humility of, and just being so like helpless in that type of situation taught me that I know it sounds like a cliche, but that don't sweat the small things part of life is just like every single, just earlier today, Coralyn, when Grayson came in to spend time with you, it's like those are the things that, make the difference and matter, and you want to be part of. So I think for me, that was a huge event. And that was a 6 months period of my life that changed every single thing. But truly, taught me those life lessons of quality time's important, one-on-one time's important, being present to your friends, family, and loved ones is important. And so, yeah, I've heard this poem before, the Dash poem, and it has been something that, I think about professionally and personally and family orientation, like make every second count, do the things that matter and don't sweat like the dumb things. Don't get in fights about stupid stuff that doesn't matter at the end of the day.
Yeah.
Or make sure you win.
That's
just kidding.
Right.
Don't
take too many L's.
Well, and the crazy thing about that is just to go back to what you said at the beginning, Jess, if you start with the end in mind, and we talked about this last episode of the one before, that whole concept of FOMO. And one of our main points in that episode was, if you have a plan and you have a goal, then you don't feel like you're missing out. But also the complementary side of that is that if you have a plan and you have goals in mind, then the things that matter to you, you'll make sure that they happen. And if you have your priorities in line, otherwise, I feel like what you were saying, Jamie, before, people, and I don't want to typecast, but people who get life and joy out of just social media likes or just those kind of superficial things, I would put money on the fact that they probably don't have a goal. And that's where they get life from, because it just defaults to the easy, defaults to the simple. So I feel like when we are showing up as our true authentic self, having a goal to strive for helps us to lead like a girl.
And I totally get that. I totally understand exactly what you're saying is like making those things, like prioritizing the important things. You know, like you just said, that's how you lead like a girl. Like you're prioritizing what's important and you're paying attention to that. Whereas I think a lot of folks probably don't pay attention to it. You know, they just kind of go through life, and if you stop and think about it, it makes a difference.
So speaking on that, goals. Am I the only one? I know I said I always talk about night. Sometimes I think I scare my mentees a little bit when they're like, 19 years old. And I'm like, you're going to die one day. I mean, that's just what we all do. We all expire at some point. We have an expiration date. And am I the only one that thinks about my funeral? And I'm not saying like every day or every moment, but that's how I set goals. That's how I get energy every day, is when I think about there's going to be a day, there's going to be a funeral. I'm not really good with actresses, but the girl from 90210 recently passed away.
Shannon Doherty.
Yes.
I'm a super fan of 90210.
And scrolling, she talks about her funeral and like a list of people that she doesn't want there because they're just going to be there just because they feel an obligation. And so I think about this stuff sometimes, and I think about, what do I want people to say at my funeral? Am I a weirdo, or do you guys think about this stuff too?
What made me think
am I a weirdo? Answer my question.
Oh, first answer.
Maybe a little bit.
I think the weirdo, to the extent that weirdo equals unique, right? Because you're a little set apart, right?
Okay.
I mean, I think that I try not to think about death, but I will say this. I will give a shout out to my sweet aunt. So very similar story to what Jamie was just talking about. I had an aunt of mine who was extremely close to me. She was almost a second mom, and she retired when she was at 65, got a cancer diagnosis later that year. And within 3 months, she passed away. And she had worked her entire life, saved, did all the right things, and just got the short straw, right? But she had time to plan her funeral. And I think one of the sweetest things that she did, there was many, many sweet things, but she brought us together, and my cousin of mine was in charge of this, but she put together a talking point for her funeral. And so all these different stories and anecdotes and just little one-liners, she put on a list, just a random 1 through, I think there might have been 30 or 40 things on there. Yeah, it's insane. My aunt is so prepared and so fantastic.
No, I love this.
And it's so great. And so at the funeral, at her reception, after the funeral was done, the expectation is that we had all these printed off on the table, and you were supposed to go through the list and like, oh, that's me. And you had to get up and share the story of why. Mine was this is so dumb, but when I was little, I was racing her to the toilet, and she wanted, my grandma had one of those foam toilets, and I was trying to get in because she's like, Corey, like, I want to go first. I'm like, no way, Lola. You old people make the seat warm, and I got to get in there first. And so like on the sheet was like, old people make the toilet seat warm. And I had to get up in front of everybody and share this like really embarrassing story about how I was like, had to take a priority. But it was just like the whole concept of like having these talking points and what was so great is she had 40 awesome things and all these friends. She had, I think, over 400 people at her funeral. She was somebody who just lived life intentionally, and it was just a very good example of how you want to not land the plane peacefully, but just crash in and just like live it to the end. And she was fantastic.
Hey,
that's awesome.
I love it. I got here Lola's talking points. Like I'm that gave me a great idea, and I think they need to be called in the name of her, Lola's talking points at my funeral.
You got to have a Lola's talking points at your funeral. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, I love that. And so I think about that stuff, and particularly I'm a little, not that I'm a little older than you guys, but I have grandkids.
You're actually, for the listeners, she's actually 3 days younger than me.
Oh yeah.
I'm the old one.
Jamie's gonna have grandkids.
I'm the
next.
oldest.
Not anytime soon, but she's gonna have grandkids next. Right? No. But when I see my grandkids, I think of their kids. And so I think of, what do I want people to say at my funeral? I've been at funerals where people, one of the things that the pastor said in this, he said, some people have asked him to say things at funerals, and it's like, it's not true. I'm a pastor. I'm not going to lie at someone's funeral. I don't want anybody to lie at my funeral or even be asked to lie at my funeral. And then if someone has nothing, what do you say? So I think about those things, and then I reverse engineer into my goals. What do I want people to say? What is the legacy? And that's my next question. Like, what is the legacy that you want to leave? What do you want people to say about you when you're gone?
You know,
It's
I
hard.
would say I don't think. Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
Go ahead. We're all
I-
excited to share.
I was
Go
just
ahead.
thinking,
Right.
like, I don't honestly care about what they say. I think a little bit more about how I'm going to make them feel or what I'm going to leave them with. So, you know, in terms of my kids, for example, I want to make sure that they're happy and healthy. I want to make sure they know how to take care of themselves. I want to make sure that I guided them in a great way as their mother. And I want to make sure, you know, that I live my life in a way where the people, I don't care if they say this about me or not, but I want them to feel like, you know, I helped them, I guided them, I taught them something, you know, I coached them, whatever that is. And I think that goes side by side with what they would say about us at our funeral. But that's like a key component, I think, to personally to my goals and my what I want for my legacy is I want to make sure they get everything I have to give. You know, whether that's here's how you meal prep or grow some flowers or what, you know what I mean? Like whatever the case is, even if it's something super simple. I mean, I'm teaching my daughter how to cook. So once a week she picks out a recipe, we get groceries and I teach her how to make a meal. That's something where I'm like, that's something really simple, but if I passed away next week, I feel like that might be a Lola list. You know, that might be something where it can be like, okay, what did we make that one time that you know? So it is more a little bit more for me about like what I'm going to leave them behind in terms of like their, you know, knowledge or how I made them feel, things like that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's good. That reminded me of a Mother's Day. I shared it on Instagram. I don't know if you guys remember. It was a few years back. Um, Jonathan, my oldest, got the kids together, got, you know, all of them, the grandkids and my nephew, and they like recorded this video
I
that
love
was
that
so
so
cute.
much.
And
I love it so much.
it was they were all just, you know, talking about me and what, you know, and how I say 5 names before I get to the right person. And then
That's a grandma
you know,
thing. My grandma used to do that too.
and it's
With the
like,
thing.
well, what's that boy's name? You know your name. Get your ass over here. Sit down. You know. And it's like it was just, but it was touching. It was the best Mother's Day gift that I have ever received because it helped me.
What did
like
Layla?
Jamie
Was
said.
that what she said, or did she say something different? What did Layla say about you?
Oh my gosh,
You're
you
great.
know I'm old and forgetful.
It was
She said
so
something to that.
cute.
Yeah, and I forget what she said, but whatever they all said, it was like totally spot on me. You know, it was probably
Mhm.
like, don't leave a dish in my sink, or don't, you know, something like that. And then, you know, something violent and threatening to their life or something. No, I'm joking. But yeah, so yeah, Core. What is that? What do you want? What's your legacy? What do you want your legacy to be? I'll just say that.
You know, I think as we're talking, one, I really need to write some of this down. I need to take a cue out of the Jessica book and actually write this down. At some point, I'm going to put you on the spot and have you share your vision board. But anybody who's listening, you want to see something spectacular, it's Jessica's vision board for her family is insane. But I think when I think of my legacy, I just think of what I'm pouring into my little boy and who I want him to grow up to be. And some of the key things I think that I want to show him how to be generous, and not just with his money, but with his time and with his talents, and looking at being a selfless person. And I feel that is an important value to me. I feel that integrity is important. And I think above all else, having a solid faith to guide his values and guide his decisions is really the legacy. And I hope that as we're teaching him that I'm reflecting those things too, that as all the things that we want people to say and who we want him to grow up in is that I would want that to be a part of my legacy also.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I love that. And I'll just piggyback on what both of you guys said. That's all part of what I want my legacy to be. I think about what I think I was born to do. And I think that sometimes that's too, like, I don't know, weird for people. It's like, I don't know what I was born to do. I know one thing is that I was born to serve others. And I think that that's one of the things that kind of bring the three of us together, is because we have such a heart to serve. That's why we're here. That's the only reason why the three of us are here, is because we want to help others be a better version of themselves. But it doesn't just stop there. And I tell everyone that I take the time to pour into mentor, this is not for you. This is for you to then give to someone else, to then give to someone else.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what I really want my legacy to be, is how many people did I touch? And maybe not directly, but I touched someone that touched 10 people, that touched 100 people. And that's what means the most to me. What feedback can we give people when they're like, okay, that all sounds good, and maybe
how do we do this?
Right. Like maybe we capture some people that are like, well, I wasn't thinking about that. I hope, and I'd love to hear some feedback on either our Lead Like a Girl Lab YouTube channel, TikTok, Instagram, wherever. Right. I just want some feedback. I'd love it if the 21-year-old young lady listening to this was like, well, I never thought about dying and what, and then the other people are like, yeah, I think about that, but I don't know how to get there. Like, what can we give people of how to think about this thing, what to do?
Yeah. I would definitely say my takeaway with this is like what you just said, Jessica, in terms of think about the end. What's your end goal?
Take time to actually think about it.
And think about that end goal, and whether you write it down or make a vision board or whatever, just the act of actually thinking about what's my end goal in life? What do I want to leave behind in terms of like what I've taught, who I've loved, whatever my impact is, and then work back, reverse engineer it from there. I think that for my takeaway is that and that inspires me to look at that too, because as you guys know, personal events over these last few weeks have been crazy. So it's like, what do I want to leave behind? And literally take the whatever hour of meditation, or grab your notebook and jot down your notes of what you want to leave behind, and kind of work back from there. I mean, that's what I would take away from this. And I thank you for that.
Yeah. I think that I would one up that and think about it, but also to Jessica's point and to Jessica's example is write it down, because I think we can walk through life and think about things, and it's almost a fleeting moment, that I think that if we don't take the time and actually write it down and make it real, then it just stays a thought and not an action. So I'll say that one thing. But the other thing I would say is, this whole time we're talking about the dash, I read this book, and this is, I'm going to give a little bit of a plug here, but I have followed this author. His name is Donald Miller since I was in my early 20s. He wrote several really good books. So if you're looking for some good reads, look up Donald Miller. But one of his most recent books, it's called Hero on a Mission. And it literally talks about the dash. He uses different terminology, but he has a whole chapter on the importance of why you should write your own eulogy and write it down. And he challenges you to read it every day. he starts off with prayer, and then he reads his eulogy, and then he reads his goals, and he encourages, and it's very detailed.
And
but
this
it's
is the first time you're telling this to me.
It's so good. I know, because it challenges me, it convicts me, and it's
Jamie,
like, oh man,
back.
it's so good. So if you're looking for a good book, this is fantastic. And and the thing about it is that I love about Donald Miller, I could talk about this guy forever. I've followed him a lot, like I said, but one of his key moments is, what is your story going to be? And he talks about, so not just your eulogy, but what is your story? And he just talks about life as a story, and you being a hero of your own story. And he kind of makes this reference of, you don't want to be a villain, you don't want to be a victim, but as you become the hero of your own story, you will morph into being a guide for other people's story. And I feel like that's where you are at, Jessica, is that you've taken these steps to write your goals down, and you are the hero of your story, and you can morph into this guide so you can bring other people along and be that person. It's just like, and he
I'm getting this book tonight on audio.
It's so good. You will love it.
Yeah.
I actually,
and I'm not going to talk to you until
until
Monday.
You get it done. Yeah.
No, that's good. That's good.
Yeah. It's so good. I could talk about it for a long time, but it's fantastic.
Yeah. I mean, it's right. Exactly what we're talking about. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I'll just leave. Here's my last thought. And that is, for someone who says, like, I don't know what I'm supposed to do. I don't know what I was born to do. I don't know. So I had a great mentor share with me that if you look at two things, okay, and write it down, right? Because I'm that's everything to me. The more details, the better. But two things I want you to think about. One is, what are your gifts that God put in you? We all have gifts, right? We are all good, like really good at something. If you don't know what your gifts are, just ask someone, they'll tell you. So what are those gifts that you have, right? Write them down. And then the second thing is, look at your story. And this is where I was getting excited, because that anytime we say that word, that's like it. Look at your story. Your story, if you look back, if I look back, that's why I talk about, having a son at 15 years old. My story and my gifts, I look at those two things and it is clear what I'm supposed to be doing. So that's what I'll leave you with, is your story and your gifts are where your answers are. Look at it, study it, think about it, and it'll walk you right into your purpose. Anything else, ladies?
That's good. Yeah. I think that I feel like too, and I would say that is that don't be afraid to own your story. And very literally, your story is yours. I think in this book, I keep going back to it, but he says something like, don't hand the pen of your story for somebody else to write. You can take ownership of what you're trying to do by being an advocate for yourself and taking some of the goal setting into your own hands and making sure you're really deliberate about how you want your life to look.
Love that. All right. Well, once again, really important. If you want, Coralyn, we can't see your swag very good. Can you?
Oh, here we go.
Is
that better?
So yeah, there we go. So Lead Like a Girl Lab, right? Because we are scientists in this lab. LeadLikeAGirlLab.com. That is our website. We need you to go to. Yes, we need you to find us on our YouTube. If you're listening to this, guess what? You are missing out on 3 beautiful smiles. So get to our YouTube page and subscribe, comment, all of that on our YouTube page, Lead Like a Girl Lab. You can also find us on Facebook, on Instagram, TikTok. Y'all, I'm learning TikTok. I'm putting some videos out there, inspiring, motivating. We're all going to get on there and share on TikTok. So find us, follow us, and we will see you next time. We're out.
Bye.